Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today's video is going to be my wrap-up for the month of May.
I should have told you that I loved you one more time.
This video is coming to you a little bit late because I wanted to do my sour book recommendations, and then I also wanted to give myself time to do my stats. I usually complete my stats and keep track of them in my journal, but I haven't been doing that.
Alright, then I don't know why the I'm doing this because this is stupid.
I didn't do it in May, and I'm not doing it in June so far, so it's not going the best. Also, if you think that there's something different about me, I left my eyebrow pencil in Little Rock when I was there last weekend, and so I haven't gotten a new one, so I just haven't done my eyebrows. Hopefully this is fine. As usual, I'm going to start with my stats, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. I have my laptop on the floor in front of me. First things first, I did read 12 books in the month of May for a total of 4,132 pages, which the page count is lower for that number of books, but I did read quite a few shorter books. This month, I read from 7 female and 4 male authors. I read 2 different sets of books by the same author. So I read like 2 books by one author and then 2 books by another author, if that makes sense. They're both books in the same series, and I'll just talk about them at once when I talk about them. But I did read from authors from 4 different countries, and I read from 5 white authors, 2 black authors, 1 East Asian author, and 2 Middle Eastern authors. I read 1 book published in the 90s, 1 book published in 2014, 1 book published in 2015, 1 book published in 2016, 2 books published in 2018, 3 books published in 2019, 2 books published in 2020, and 1 book published in 2021. For genres, I read 2 science fiction, 2 nonfiction, 5 fantasy, and 3 mystery thrillers. I also read 1 middle grade, I read 5 young adult, and I read 6 adult novels. As far as star ratings go, I had 0 1 star, 1 2 star, 2 3 stars, 5 4 stars, and 4 5 stars for a total, or an average rating, I guess, of 4 stars, which is really good for me. I also read 9 novels, 1 collection of short stories, 1 graphic novel, and 1 essay, and I read 1 ebook. I listened to 3 audiobooks, and I read 8 books physically. So those are my stats. As usual, I'm just going to go through the books in the order in which I read them and talk about them, except for the books that I read that are in the same series. I will talk about them all together. So the first book that I completed in May was Wake Siren by Nina McLaughlin, which is a retelling of Ovid's It's a retelling of Ovid's It's a retelling of Ovid's Metamorphoses.
Please clap.
Which is like Greek mythology. So I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I really love the cover of this. If you get a chance, I picked it up at Goodwill. That's why I bought it. It was a cover buy for me. But I also felt like some of the actual stories in it were really unique and fun. And there were like really interesting twists on the classic Greek myths that you're sort of aware of already. But I didn't feel like enough of them were different enough from the original stories to really warrant them being made. There were like 2 in here that I feel like the author did a really good job encompassing the vibe of the story and also giving you something of a like different take on it while still remaining faithful to the original material. But the rest of them I was just kind of like, this is literally the myth, so I don't really understand why we're rehashing it. I didn't get the point for some of them. But I didn't think it was bad. I think if you're into that kind of thing, you might like it. Moving on. The second book that I finished in May is The Damned by Renee Ahdieh, which is the sequel to The Beautiful by the same author, obviously, which I read earlier this year. And it's basically a YA paranormal romance series set in New Orleans about vampires. We are following Celine, who is a French woman who just came to the US, and she's trying to escape something traumatic that happened in her past. And we're also following Sebastian, who is the like male lead, and he has some like deep dark secrets, and it's about vampires in New Orleans essentially. But there's also other like magical elements that you get in the second book. And in the first book, there's very little paranormal aspects, vampires, things like that. There's very little fantasy. It's mostly about developing the relationships between the characters, getting the characters' backstories, and then making you like interested in the characters. And then the second book is where we get the actual vampires and other fantasy elements, and there's a lot of fantasy in the second book. So if that was something that bothered you about the first book, because I've heard that is like a pretty common complaint that the first book didn't really have any fantasy elements, the second book has got you covered. I really liked it. I thought it was fun. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked the romance. It gets a little steamier in the second one. There's a little like more going on, which I really enjoyed. And I'm really excited for the finale, which I believe is coming out in December, sometime this year, at the end of this year. So yes, I'm very excited to read the last book once it is out. The third book that I finished in May is The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. Since I read this book, I've heard a lot of really like nasty, not great things about AJ Finn. Jess from Jess Owens does her book community videos, and I will link her video down below if I remember, where she talks about AJ Finn and all the like crappy things he's done as a person, like lying about his parents having cancer, lying about him having cancer, all kinds of stuff. They're also making a TV series about it, so if you're interested, I think James Franco will be in that. But I'm not going to get into it too much here. The Woman in the Window is a mystery thriller, and it's also recently been made into a movie adapted with Netflix, starring Amy Adams. It follows this woman living in New York City alone in this big house, and she has agoraphobia, which means that she's afraid to go outside. So something traumatic has happened to her. She no longer can go outside without having panic attacks and feeling really bad anxiety. And so what she does all day is she watches her neighbors, and one day she sees one of her neighbors get murdered or get stabbed, and so that's sort of where the storyline goes. She's also an alcoholic, so it's got the whole alcoholic-induced amnesia trope. I've heard people who read a lot of thrillers don't love this one because it is kind of tropey. I don't read a lot of thrillers. If you've been around on my channel for a while, then you know that I don't read a lot of thrillers. So for me, I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was scary. I thought it was like keeping me on the edge of my seat. I really enjoyed reading it. I felt very captivated by it. I really liked the characterization. I do think that parts of it were kind of predictable. Like I did guess some of the twists and turns along the way, but as I've mentioned, and I mentioned in the vlog that I read this book in, I don't mind that. I don't mind being able to guess where a mystery thriller is going, because for me, part of the fun of a mystery thriller is solving the mystery. I did give that one 5 stars, and I really, really enjoyed it. The next book I read, I won't spend too much time on. It's a graphic novel called The Best Damn Answers to Life's Hardest Questions. It is by Tess Coman, and it's illustrated by Katie Vernon. The illustrations in this were a 10 out of 10 for me. I loved them, but it's a flowchart book. So you follow one thing, and then it like branches off, and you read all the different answers to life's hardest questions. But it's really like questions like, do I need to wash this shirt? Should I drink wine today? Things like that. This book was really, for lack of a better word, chuggy. So I think if you know someone who is turning like 32 and is really interested in like, if she has a t-shirt that says like wine mom or something and has a wooden sign in her house that says but first coffee, this is like the perfect gift for that person. I'm not that person, so it was not perfect for me. It kind of annoyed me. It was kind of boring to me. It was just very like redundant and unoriginal to me. But I think if you do like this kind of thing, I think it's funny for that. It just didn't suit my sense of humor, if that makes sense. The next book that I read was Amari and the Night Brothers, another book that I gave 5 stars. This is the first book in a middle grade fantasy series about this young girl named Amari, who is the only black girl and only poor girl at her school. She's there on scholarship, and at the beginning of the movie,
that is not correct.
At the beginning of the book, she is getting kicked out of her school, or at least losing her scholarship to her school, which is essentially kicking her out because she can't afford to pay to go there, because her older brother has gone missing, and some people in her class are saying that her brother is dead, and she, I think rightfully so, gets mad at them. And I think she pushes someone. So she's getting kicked out of school, but then she finds a briefcase in her brother's closet that's beeping, and she opens it up, and it has an invitation to let her go to this magical summer camp where she's going to learn all about the supernatural things that interact with the human world. And she finds out that that's where her brother has been, and he's missing there too, but she gets to go on this adventure to go find her brother and solve this mystery. It's really cute. It was really fun. I really liked the elements of the magic that were in this. I liked the different departments in the summer camp. I thought that was a really unique, cool thing to do. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars, and I cannot wait for the sequel. Then I listened to, as an audiobook, In Amber in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and this is where I'm going to talk about 2 books because I listened to the sequel immediately after the first book. I loved the first book, gave it 5 stars. I think I gave the second book 4 stars, but I might go back and lower it to 3 because I felt really underwhelmed by it, unfortunately. The second book is called The Torch Against the Night. And if you don't know, An Ember in the Ashes is a YA fantasy series following 2 main characters. It's Laya, who is a scholar slave girl, and she goes undercover because her brother is arrested. So she goes undercover with the resistance, and they send her into this military school called Blackcliff as a slave to try to find out information. And they say that if she does this for them, they will help her get her brother out of prison. The other perspective that we follow is Elias, who is a mask, which is like the highest level of assassin that you can be. He's in his final year of training at Blackcliff. So he's being trained in this military school, but he doesn't want to be a mask, and he doesn't really want to serve the emperor in that way. And it's just about like, they sort of meet, and there's like an insta-love thing which people hate, but I actually really liked. I liked their relationship a lot, and I felt like there was an instant attraction, but to me there wasn't insta-love, if that makes sense, but I digress. And then the sequel obviously follows the same characters. It adds more side characters. You get out of Blackcliff, so you get to see like more of the world at large. I will say in the sequel, I think because we follow both Elias and Laya's perspectives, the author ended up splitting them up again, which made sense for the storytelling part of it, because it didn't really make sense to get both of their perspectives if they were going to be together the whole time. But I don't know. I liked them together, and I didn't I wasn't as intrigued by the second book. I think I just wanted it to go a different direction than it did, and I'm sure it will go that direction eventually, but it's a 4-book series, so I'm probably gonna have to wait until the very, very end. Then I listened to the essay We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is an essay based on her really popular TED Talk of the same name. So if you've already listened to the TED Talk or seen the TED Talk, you don't need to read this. I had already seen the TED Talk, so I didn't get very much out of it. But I do think that she brings a very unique perspective, especially to Western feminism, because she is a Black woman and she's from Nigeria. So it's interesting to listen to her version, I guess, of feminism. The next book that I read was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Moutar and Max Gladstone. And this is a science fiction book told in a series of love letters between 2 enemy agents of different warring factions. So it's Red and Blue, and they are 2 women who are time traveling back and forth, trying to thwart the other one's plans so that their side can win in this war. What I really enjoyed about this book is that you're confused, like probably 50% of the way through, you have no idea what's going on, and then you're able to start piecing together what's going on, and by the end, I was in tears. I also really enjoyed that it's very short, so it was easy to read. I really liked that 2 different authors wrote it, so one author wrote for one character and one author wrote for the other character, because it gave the characters 2 very distinct voices. Yeah, I absolutely love this book. It made me cry. It was so good. I gave it 5 stars. I do understand why it's not for everybody, but I really think that if it sounds interesting to you, like a sapphic love story that's like kind of confusing, kind of weird. If you like weird and confusing books, I think you would like it. The next books that I read were the first 2 books in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson, which is a YA mystery series. I gave these both 4 stars, and I really enjoyed them. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is definitely the best YA mystery I've ever read. I was actually like kind of freaked out at parts, and like I was very on the edge of my seat. Very page turnery. It was super, super good. I liked the sequel as well, but something about me is that, like, even with podcasts, right, like true crime podcasts, I always skip the episodes that are about missing persons, because I'm not as interested in that as I am in a murder. And I don't know what that means about me or what that says about me, but I felt the same way about these books. The first book is this young girl, Pippa. She's a high school senior, and she's writing her senior capstone project on this murder that happened in her town because the boyfriend of the girl who was killed is who everybody thinks did it, and he killed himself, and so people think he's just guilty, but Pippa isn't so sure, and so she wants to figure out if that's really what happened, and it's just about that and her solving the actual murder, which is really cool. There's a podcast element in this, which I love. There's mixed media from her writing her report, which is really cool. You get some of her like field notes of like what she's doing. And also Pippa's just a really like fun, interesting character, but she still seems very down to earth, which I really appreciated. The sequel is Right after Pippa has solved the first mystery or the first murder, one of her friends actually comes to her and says, hey, my brother went missing. Do you mind us using your podcast to try to spread the word that he's missing and try to find him? So that's the sequel. I won't go too far into it with too many details because obviously I don't want to spoil anything from the first book, but like I said, I really enjoyed the series. I didn't like the mystery in the second one quite as much because I'm just not as interested in that kind of thing. I'll highly recommend both of these. The last book that I finished was 2010 Odyssey 2 by Arthur C. Clarke, which is the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey by the same author, which I read last year. It was one of my favorite books of 2020. It's a hard science fiction series about the outer reaches of space, first contact with aliens. The second book picks up 9 years after the first book. It's 2010, and they are looking for the spaceship that was left in space in the first book and trying to figure out what happened on the Discovery. So the first book, the astronauts are on Discovery and they lose contact with their Earth people. The second book is them sending a new crew out to go find the spaceship because they've located it and they want to know what happened. It's really cool. There's a lot of really inventive ideas. I gave this book 3 stars. I did not love it nearly as much as I loved the first book. I really do think that if you loved the first book, you don't need to read the second book. I don't think you need to carry on with the series. I personally didn't feel like the second book really added anything until like the last 45 pages. And even then, I think you could have gone without it. That's it. Those are the 12 books that I read in May. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books. If you have, how did you feel about them? And also, if you haven't, let me know what you did read in May, as I would love to know. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Make sure to subscribe if you are not already. I do post 2 videos every single week on Sundays and Thursdays, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
I should've told you that I loved you one more time.